Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here representing COSI, the Coalition for Secure AI. My name is Jason Garman. I'm a Principal Security Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services. I've been working in the cybersecurity industry for about 30 years or so. And I'm very, very honored to be part of the COSI Technical Steering Committee and also working on some of the work streams for generating content for the Coalition for Secure AI. Appropriate that the lead into this is about artificial intelligence, because that's obviously what I'll be talking about a lot during this discussion. And just kind of talk a little bit about what COSI is. It is an open ecosystem of AI and security experts from a bunch of different organizations, right? So it's not just cloud providers. We also have folks from Red Hat, from Dell, from a lot of different organizations, IBM, Google, Microsoft. NVIDIA, right? So we have representation from all of the major players in this space so that we can help and create best practices, guidance for people. How can we secure our AI development practices? How can we do effective AI security research? And how can we help our defenders, right, with all of these new risks that are coming out with this new democratized AI infrastructure, right? So COSI operates under OASIS Open. So this is an open, source project. We launched in June, right? So we're still working on a lot of our deliverables, but you can follow along with our progress on GitHub. So we can share that URL and put that in the chat afterwards. So just a little bit about the sponsors, right? So I mentioned some of the folks that I work with on a weekly basis. But you can see we are widely sponsored by a variety of different organizations. And by the way, you don't have to be a sponsor in order to contribute. So we'll talk about contributing. So anyone is welcome to come and join COSI and to contribute time, expertise, content into the different work streams. There's no need for sponsorship. We're very thankful for the sponsors that do choose to help fund this effort, but there's no need to be a sponsor in order to be a contributor. You just have to sign a contributor license agreement, and then you can join a work stream. So why COSI? We'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but the idea here is that securing AI is challenging. We are all facing these new threats that are coming out from AI systems, and there's a lot of confusion out there and a lot of fragmented advice. I've served on not just COSI, but also a couple other groups, such as the Cloud Security Alliance, talking about these topics. And you would be surprised, or maybe not surprised, at the just diversity of guidance that's out there and the misguidance that's out there on these topics. And so what we're trying to do here is address this by creating this collaborative environment, by getting the best minds in the room together, hash out some of these topics, and come up with a consensus on best practices, not just a bunch of work papers and white papers about these topics, but also architectural guidelines, all that kind of good stuff, right? That's what we want to do so that it's actionable for defenders of these systems. So now, how do we fit in with the broader ecosystem? We have a lot of other partners in the other open source ecosystems, such as we have Google with the Secure AI framework, and we're looking for folks, right? Again, this is an open project. We're always looking for contributors, and we are open for collaborating with other open source projects as well. We believe that all of this knowledge should not be gatekept, in other words. So let's talk a little bit about some of the security concerns that we see organizations facing around this topic. I'll talk about DeepSeek real quick. One of the biggest issues that we see when we're looking at AI, and specifically when we're looking at generative AI, because obviously it's the new kid on the block and everybody's talking about it, is what is the scope of this particular concern? What is the scope of your risk exposure? So when we talk about DeepSeek, an interesting topic because DeepSeek can mean a couple of different things. DeepSeek could mean the publicly accessible website hosted in China, where you can input text and get a completion from a generative AI model. What risk does that expose your company and organization to? That's different from DeepSeek, the open weights model that you can download off of Hugging Face. You can download that, you can host it internally, you can isolate it from the greater internet, and you can probably use that in a much different manner than, say, submitting your sensitive data to a public website that's sitting in the public in China. So there's a lot of confusion about these things, and it's very easy to get just like to kind of conflate all these things together. And so providing defenders a definitive understanding of those different risks is a big, big piece of what we're trying to do with this effort. A couple of different examples here. One of the big things that I believe strongly about in this topic is that we as a community cannot forget the lessons of the past. We just heard about the idea of not communicating authorization status to downstream systems. So if we look at something like this confused pilot paper from UT Austin, it talks about applying the same concepts of a confused deputy to a RAG or retrieval augmented generation system, AI system. And how you can do, for example, prompt injection that's indirect into one of these RAG systems to override its instructions, its what it thinks it needs to do in order to take over the decision-making power of the AI system, right? It's the same concept of a confused deputy. It's just now applied in a different way. An even more kind of concrete example would be this idea of kind of the basic code injection vulnerabilities in some of these serialization languages, right? So if you look at how models used to be distributed, they used to be Python pickle files. How many of you know what a Python pickle file is, right? We're technologists, right? And so what is a pickle file? It's simply a serialization of a class hierarchy. It's code embedded in a data file. And so now you had these models that were simply large pieces of Python code, and you would just load them completely untrusted into your production systems. Well, obviously, pickle files can contain Python bytecode because it's a full representation of a Python class, for example. And now all of a sudden you have the opportunity for remote code execution inside of your environment because you downloaded a compromised model off of Hugging Face. Now, of course, these things are being addressed over time, but we seem to forget the lessons of the past when we're trying to adopt the technologies of the future. It just seems to be a common repeating mistake, right? So it's very important for us to communicate that to the broader ecosystem, to demonstrate what people need to think when they are, addressing these concerns, when they're adopting these new technologies, and so they can make informed decisions about how they can protect those systems. Now, of course, we've talked not only about securing AI systems, but also how we can use AI to protect it. I like to think of things as a three-legged stool, which is a weird analogy, but just bear with me. So we have the first lesson, the first leg of the stool, which is protecting AI systems. We just talked about that. The second leg of the stool is using AI to protect your systems. So this is where we see things like agentic AI coming into the fray. We also see things talking about automation, right? The model context protocol. This is an open standard from Anthropic about how you can connect AI systems into sensitive databases and so forth, have a two-way communication securely so that you can expose that data into an AI system to help it make decisions on your behalf. But the third leg of that stool we just talked about as well, which is how do we defend against AI-based threats? And we've seen some research in that area, right? So in 2016, for example, DARPA had the Cyber Grand Challenge, which was very interesting, right? So almost 10 years ago now, we were already looking at how we can use autonomous AI agents to attack remote systems and how to defend them too. So they did both sides of the equation, but this is something that has been researched in the past. It would be interesting to see how we can leverage some of the lessons learned from that experience into defending against what we see as novel threats now, with adversaries potentially using this AI sort of technology against us. Well, from the theoretical back into the practical. So we have 4 work streams in COSI that are active right now. I serve on work stream 2. I'll talk about each one of these in turn, but we've really tried to focus on how can we prepare our defenders the best we can to defend against these new AI threats, or sorry, to defend the systems that are using AI. So I'll talk quickly about work stream 1. This is about supply chain security. So there's been a lot of talk about, well, do I trust a model? What is the model security model? What is the model's safety? What does it mean for a model to be safe? What does it mean for a model to be secure? Where did the model's data come from? Is that model poisoned? What does that mean, right? There's a lot of questions here about AI models, for example. So what is the data provenance? How can we understand that a model is unchanged from when we had it, right? As you know, if you've ever played with generative AI specifically, any small change to the model can have big effects on the output. And so understanding and controlling your supply chain in especially a generative AI world can be especially important, even if all you're thinking about is whether that model is performant or not, whether it's performing the tasks that we want it to. Because again, those small changes on the input can make huge changes on the output. I'm serving on work stream 2, so it's my favorite work stream, if I have to call a favorite of the 4. But this is about preparing defenders of AI, right? So this is about that first leg of that 3-legged stool. A lot of organizations are rushing to adopt this new technology, and we want to prepare them with the tools and techniques that they need in order to make that deployment successful and secure. So thinking about things like platform security and security governance. One of the things that I'm working on right now is about zero trust with AI. And what that means is kind of going back to that idea of I've delegated, I forgot that I've delegated authorization to a downstream service. A lot of organizations are putting way too much trust in the security decisions of an AI system because they're anthropomorphizing AI. In other words, they are treating the AI as a person. And once you do that, you bring all the biases about people with you. You kind of assume that a person is going to be trustworthy as you are, and you cannot make that assumption with AI. So how can we take the lessons of zero trust, things like, constant authorization, things like assumption of breach, and bring them into the AI world? And so when you think about that, and you think about in terms of constraining the agency that you delegate into the AI, and you instead put those constraints on deterministic security mechanisms outside of the AI system, you can think about things like prompt injection in an entirely different light. Because at that point, the AI system doesn't have any authority to make decisions about security that you don't like, because you control that from the outside. So prompt injection or jailbreaking has no effect on the security aspect of that particular system if you've constrained the system from the outside. So think about that. That's one of the things that we want to kind of contribute back to the community, is how to think about some of these topics so that we can make that risk management and that sort of thought process and threat modeling way easier for organizations to go through. They're not spinning their wheels thinking about, oh my goodness, I have no idea, this thing could just do anything and I can't control it. Work stream 3 is all about governance. There are something like 800, yes?
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, there's something like 800 different AI governance regimes that are out there in the world right now. And trying to make sense of that for organizations is a very, very big challenge. So workstream 3 is all about looking at that and understanding how we can help customers and organizations navigate that morass of regulations. And then finally, workstream 4 is about agentic AI security. So I gave a very simplistic model about constraining the authority and the agency of a system from the outside. When we think about agentic AI and giving AI systems way more authority and way more kind of leeway to make decisions on our behalf, how do you start thinking about securing that? If I tell an AI system an open-ended goal of, let's say, here's my credit card information, go book me a 2-week tour of Europe, how do I put controls around that? Where does that fit in? And that's an agentic style process where you have multiple agents, perhaps, all working in tandem, all making different decisions, and all communicating with each other. So I'll leave you with this. How can you contribute? We've got a GitHub link. Again, I'll share that with everyone in the chat. You can actively contribute. We've got details available at that link as well. And we are always looking for folks to come and join us. So I'll leave this for time for questions. Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you on the COSI.
Before we get the questions, since I did notice some people duck out already, one reminder to everybody that when you leave, you do have to turn in your badge. So we don't want to get our hosts in trouble. We were very successful yesterday. All the badges that got handed out were handed back by the end of the day. We want to achieve that again today. So any questions? Alan?
One of the core goals and challenges of interoperability is predictable data homogenization, standardization. How much is that a problem? So I'll throw out data cards and model cards as being wildly unstandardized.
Yes.
And how much does our generative technology allow a certain flexibility and leeway to say maybe strict data parameterization isn't as important as it used to be anymore?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. So model cards are the standard ways, quote unquote, standard way of communicating the security and safety parameters of a model, the data provenance, et cetera. And there is no standard for that, right? It's just basically a research paper at the end of the day, right? And so your second part of that question is, can we solve that using these new tools? Well, I would be cautious about that. I think it would help make things go quicker. But as has been mentioned many times here in the past, hallucinations are a problem, right? And so it is very easy to get into a place where you blindly accept the structured output of, say, a model that is, you feed it some unstructured data. You say, hey, can you please summarize it and put it in this structured form? And it straight up hallucinates some parameters inside of there. And it's very difficult to detect that. It takes a lot of time to try and validate it. So I think there is a place for that to be used for automation, but I do think there has to be some review of that. And so therefore, is it helpful at this point? I don't know. All right.
I'm going to steal the next question, but first of all, sort of prompt yes, people should get involved.
Yes.
And re-point out that there is the whole sponsorship effort where you're involved more in the leadership team to get some of the final say, particularly in standards that come out. And there's but anybody can just contribute. I'm actually turn the question around to at least two people in the audience. I noticed the government wasn't on the list on any of the sponsors, neither CISA nor NSA were there.
So for me,
you guys participate?
I don't know. I took an action to go to our AI security center. I mean, this effort is fairly recent.
Yes.
It may not be on their radar yet, but I will attempt to put it there.
Awesome. Thank you. Love to see you guys there.
I've already asked two people, are we involved / what do we think of them?
Good. Excellent. Hopefully they think good thoughts about it. Yes.
Can you put on hierarchical guardrails over prompts? In other words, within an organization, I can say that from an organization point of view, here's the range of questions you could ask. From a line of business point of view, from a department point of view, and then from a job function point of view. These are the ranges of prompts you could ask. In other words, why not build security into your artificial intelligence system like we've done all these years up to now?
So this is a great question, right? So I'm going to, since I work at AWS, I'm going to use an analogy for AWS services, right? So AWS has a service called Bedrock. Bedrock is our generative AI service, right? It's an umbrella service, and that's where we put all of our generative AI products inside of. Bedrock has a subservice called Guardrails. And so Guardrails is our, I'm going to use this word very clearly, safety mechanism for generative AI. And so one of the Bedrock Guardrails features is you can set a list of denied topics. Denied topics. Not allowed topics, denied topics, right? And so the point that I'm going to make here is that working with natural language is an unbounded problem, right? You cannot, in a deterministic fashion, define a list of topics that are allowed. It just doesn't work that way. And so the denied topics, for example, works the best it can, and it still has faults. You know, I work there, and I'm going to be happily admit that this is not a perfect technology. And I don't know if it ever will be, right? And so therefore, the best solution, in my opinion, is to kind of make those definitions in ways that you can define them and enforce them in a deterministic fashion. So if you have a list of things that you want the AI system to talk about, then only give it access to information that would answer those questions. Does that mean it will never answer a question that it may have foundation knowledge about, or it will never hallucinate something that it has no information about? Can't guarantee that, right? That will probably happen at some point or another. But in the general case, natural language, in other words, if you have to define your security restrictions in natural language, you've probably lost.